All righty. Well, thank you. And thank you for the introduction as well. And, to start things off, first off, wanted to say thank you to the world-class business leaders for the invite and for having me speak to y'all today. I do feel bad for not being there in person, partly so that I could talk to y'all, but secondly, because the snacks must be like incredible. Because it took y'all a while to get back here. But yeah, let's get started. Couple things first, a little bit of housekeeping. This presentation was built prior to the recent merger between Tilray and Aphria, so it's not updated for the new company moving forward. So just wanted to make you all aware of that. Also, during the coffee break, don't know if you had a chance or not, but the Director of Europe, Sasha Melkarik, is in the crowd today, as well as our VP of Business Development in Europe, Arnie Welkins. So when you do have some time, please stop by, say hello, chat with them, ask them any questions that you may have regarding Tilray and what we got going on. But moving right into the presentation, my name is Stephen Arthur George. Like I said, thank you for having me today, and thank you for all taking the time to listen to me. But why should you listen to me? Well, I'm originally from Lansing, Michigan. For those of you who have been following medical cannabis for quite some time, Michigan was one of the earlier states to approve medical cannabis back in 2008. So I have been involved in the industry for quite some time. I do live and work in Lisbon, Portugal. I heard it is a bit cloudy in Frankfurt today, but it's also cloudy here, so don't feel bad. I've been working with Tilray for the past 3+ years. And as I mentioned previously, involved with medical cannabis industry for roughly around 10 years. And I've been a longtime advocate for both patient access to medical cannabis, as well as just destigmatizing the cannabis plant in general. I am originally from Michigan. You see the X on the left, roughly right about where that at. Ironically enough, Michigan is very close to Canada. I often say A as part of my language. It's a very Canadian thing, but right across the lake there in the river, you have Canada. So very close. And then now, as you see me over in Portugal, ironically, again, in one of the closest European countries, or if not the closest to the US. So been quite a journey. I have been here for 4.5 years. So I was living in Portugal prior to working with Tilray, although Tilray was, I think we actually arrived similarly around 2016, 2017. So equal timing, but a little bit of a fascinating story as well. But that's me. So thanks again for everyone in the room for coming out today. Tilray, as you know, is a global company. We're going to focus on Portugal in the latter half of the presentation today, but I wanted to give you all a bit of an overview of where we're at currently, both globally in Europe and also in Portugal. So we do have production both in Canada facilities and as well as in Portugal. The Portuguese facility here, we'll get into a little bit later, but it's one of the largest and most advanced in Europe, and is now supplying multiple countries from that facility here in Portugal, which is in Cantanhede, which is about 2 hours north of where I sit here in Lisbon. A little bit more into Tilray. We were founded in 2013. We're currently exporting to about 17 countries over 5 continents. We do have studies going on worldwide, also in some clinical stuff, as well as observational studies. Have a broad portfolio of both preparations and substances based on the cannabis plant, depending on what jurisdiction you're in and what the regulations look like in that specific jurisdiction, allow for what is available along with approvals and etc. There are thousands of patients around the globe now accessing Tilray medical cannabis products, which we are extremely proud of. And we have one of the highest ethical and medical policy standards in place currently and will continue that moving forward. If you take a look at our international footprint here, you can see all of the countries in blue and in bold we have exported to, and a couple other countries on the near horizon. But being the fact that, there's no international law that prevents this, we are then allowed to export to other countries. And since 2015, we've seen many countries around the globe changing their stance at a national or federal level on medical cannabis. So then, what do things look like for Tilray here in Europe? Well, as I believe many of you are in the room to understand today what the demand looks like, and I think we all are quite aware of the potential demand and potential opportunity here in Europe. Over 740 million people. We have an estimated roughly 100 million with chronic pain, which seems to be one of the indications more frequently prescribed for. We also estimate the market to be roughly 2.0 billion by 2024. As I mentioned in the previous slide, we have seen since 2015, many countries start to legalize medical cannabis around Europe and put regulations in place. And we also see countries that are also offering reimbursement in Europe. And I think that goes to the more pharmaceutical focused or traditional pharmaceutical pathway for access, which I think is a great thing and something that Europe's definitely done a bit different than other places around the globe. In the future, 30 million patients may be able to access cannabis over the next 10 years, but right now it's about less than 100,000 here in Europe. So again, shows that opportunity for the future. Tilray's vision is to be Europe's most trusted, valued medical cannabis company, and our mission is to improve patients' lives through access to our medical cannabis products. One of the major things that I did just mention, that we see differently from both, and I think this is a big global thing to hit on, is that we see a bit different from Europe and what's going on in some of the North American markets, most specifically, the States, but also in Canada. But you see the European GMP level, I don't know if it was discussed previously, but is at quite a high standard, going along with the EU pharmacopoeia. Making sure that products are of that highest pharmaceutical standard when being offered to patients throughout Europe. And one of the things that we often, I think, is overlooked is that, here in Europe, one of the things I do like to highlight is that most countries, from what I see, are all offering medical cannabis via prescription, and it is a per product prescription. Whereas many of the states back in the US, you would see a medical cannabis program where it was either a license for a year or some type of access for an extended period of time, but was not on a per prescription base. And another significant difference that I see between the two markets as well is that in Europe, we seem to see that all medical cannabis is being distributed through the pharmacies like traditional medicine, which I think is another great thing. Whereas over in the US, you're seeing quite a bit of a difference, right? Where medical cannabis is offered through a retail location, often named a dispensary, but can be a bit confusing and a bit different than what we see in Europe. But again, I think Europe is taking the right approach to medical cannabis. We're talking about a medical product here, so why wouldn't it be offered like other medical products? So now let's get into Portugal. Luckily, since you guys were a bit late, I got to speed things up a bit and move kind of through here so we can catch up the next speaker. But did want to highlight some interesting things about Portugal. Obviously not one of the largest countries in Europe, but a lot of exciting things going on here in Portugal from an industry standpoint. And also a unique market from or territory, if you will, from a cultivation standpoint as well. So Fascinating thing, I don't know if we have any Portuguese in the room today, but a famous physician, well-known physician Garcia de Horta, traveled to India back in 1534. And this was actually when he first discovered the medicinal use of cannabis and what they were doing over in India. He actually, when he returned or while he was there, not quite sure, but actually wrote a book about the different experiences and about some of this different plant medicine that he noticed was being used. And as you can see on the right, there is a picture of the cannabis plant. And as you see, it says bong at the top. And this was a name for the way they actually consumed the plant. And they called it the bong. Moving a little bit forward, fast forwarding, roughly 500 years, 450 years, the Portuguese Parliament decided to do something quite monumental across the globe, and they made a decision to decriminalize the acquisition, possession, and use of specified plants, substances, or preparations for a person's own consumption, and reclassified this behavior into misdemeanors. A few years previously, they built a commission for the National Strategy for Drug Control. This was, like I said, created in 1998, and they were given a task to propose a strategy to combat drugs. They ended up recommending the decriminalization that was mentioned above, and this was put into place in 2001. The success of the program is debated. There was quite a large heroin problem in Portugal at the time that they've done some great work on, but again, some debate around the program and its success, being that decriminalization is one step in the right direction, but it still provides no high quality, relatable or reliable medical cannabis that is safe to access. So although the regulation back in 2001 decriminalized drugs and cannabis fell into that bucket of drugs, there was still no recognized medical value, right? And so no way for patients, again, to access safe, high quality, reliable medical cannabis. But then after 2 decades, in 2017, the Parliament here started discussing medical cannabis regulations again, and they took action again on drug policy. So what is the current environment here in Portugal? Well, in 2018, they established the legal framework for the use of drugs, preparations, and substances based on the cannabis plant for medicinal purposes, namely its prescription and dispensation in the pharmacies. Legal framework was aimed to make the treatment with drugs, preparations, and substances based on the cannabis plant accessible while guaranteeing that the preparations made available meet all necessary requirements, quality, and safety, and also to guarantee the prevention of the misuse of drugs, preparations, and substances in accordance with the United Nations Convention Against Illicit Traffic in Narcotic Drugs and Psychoactive Substances. Thus, the entire production chain here in Portugal is monitored, from growing the plant to preparing and distributing it is known and controlled, making it possible to guarantee that the products are produced in accordance with all good practices and applicable requirements. Infarmed is the health regulator here and also the regulatory body who is controlling the processes. To take a look a bit further into the timeline of what we've seen here in Portugal, in January 2008 was when the law was introduced to regulate medical cannabis. In July of 2018, the law was published to regulate the medical cannabis. And in January 2019, Infarmed did end up publishing the regulations. And in February of 19 is when it went live. And the regulations were in place, and we could start moving forward with finding ways for access for patients in Portugal. To go a little bit further into the law from July, it established the legal framework for the use of medical products, preparations, and substances. I'll go into that on the next slide a bit deeper in this preparations and substances, but you see these words used here in Portugal quite often. But when we look at that higher level overview of the regulations, again, Infarmed is the regulatory body over everything here regarding the medical cannabis. It is prescription only. So need a prescription from the physician to access medical cannabis, notification pricing for manufacturers. It is distribution via the pharmacy. As I mentioned previously as well, we're not seeing any reimbursement here in Portugal yet, but we do have a pathway for a marketing authorization that they made available, which I think is quite unique here in Portugal and different than other European countries. There are 7 therapeutic indications recommended for the use of medical cannabis. And again, I said there's this differentiation between medical cannabis products and substance and preparations. So the approved indications, I won't go through them all here with you, but you can see spasticity, nausea and vomiting from chemotherapy, HIV. We have appetite stimulation as well. One of the large ones, chronic pain that I've mentioned before that you see all across Europe, Tourette syndrome, epilepsy, and therapeutically resistant glaucoma. It is possible for physicians to write off label in Portugal, but these are the 7 recommended and approved indications by Infarmed when the regulation was originally put forward. Going into the ACM that I mentioned, it is a marketing authorization for preparations and substances based on the cannabis plant for medical purposes. But this is different than the marketing authorization, which is an AIM in Portugal for medical products. And I think one of the main differences there is obviously not requiring the extensive clinical data, phase 3 trials to allow access to the patients, which is what we're seeing in many other countries as well, whether it's unlicensed medicine or some regulation that allows patients to access cannabis a bit quicker than what we would see with some medication that was created in a lab that no one had seen before. What this allows for, again, it's only preparations of substances. Infarmed has 90 days to review the process. You do need a different marketing authorization for each SKU. And the revision is conducted again by Infarmed, owning the entire process. If you are awarded an ACM, you can have this for 5 years, which then it can be renewed after that. When we take a little bit deeper look into what's going on in Portugal, and especially from a Tilray standpoint, first off, just macro level, we have roughly 10 million inhabitants here. We see that around 8% use cannabis. This is what we see from some data from Prohibition Partners, I believe. Back in 2016. Forecasted market for 2028 is roughly $500 million. And it's the first EU medical cannabis innovation hub with our facility in Canton Yed. We work closely with APED, with the Scientific Pain Association here in Portugal. We also work closely with the health regulators, not only on the implementation of access into the market here in Portugal, but also it's where we cultivate and produce medical cannabis to export to other European countries. And we have a research in partnership with the University of Coimbra, a university that has a long history of medical excellence. As you can see where we're located there in Portugal, we're now exporting around Europe. So you can see some of the countries that we do export to. It's been quite an exciting time. I've been with Tilray since the facility first kind of got plants in the ground, or even a little bit prior to that here in Portugal. So it's been an exciting run. And we do have the GMP facility here in Portugal that was audited and awarded the GMP by the Infarmed regulators here in Portugal. And now I'm going to have the conference group help me play this video, because if I play it here, I'm the only one that'll hear it, and it's got some nice background music, so they'll go ahead and play this video for me. But it's a look at our facility here in Portugal. was told to wait a few seconds, but hopefully you can now hear me again. But that is our facility in Cantanhede, Portugal. Like I said, just a couple hours north of me here in Lisbon, Portugal. This is our GMP hub here in Portugal, as I mentioned, inside and outside on 4.4 hectares. And what we have the ability to do here is not only finish this good cannabis flower, but also finish good full spectrum extracts and bulk extract for pharmaceutical production as well. One of the things that I mentioned earlier is Sasha and both Arnie are in the crowd today. So again, feel free to stop by and chat with them. I was previously acting as country manager for Tilray, now acting as alliance manager. So I do work with our business to business partners across Europe, Middle East, and Africa as well. So feel free to talk with the gentleman in the room today, or reach out to me or any of the conference organizers for my contact details, and we can help you out with whatever you need and go from there. So I appreciate everyone taking the time to listen to me. I think I got us caught up a little bit. So thank you so much. But if we do have any questions, I'd be more than happy to take some.
Thank you, Stephen.